So, hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about completing the residential purchase agreement. Now, when a buyer and a seller come to an agreement to purchase a property, okay, the buyer accept the offer from the seller, and the next step that they go through is to complete the purchase agreement. When we look at this agreement, it's really a large agreement that has different sections and forms. In my opinion, there's three areas that are notable to mention. These areas are: this is an offer from, that's actually a section of the forms. Then there's also the financing terms area and also the condition of the property. Now, when it comes to this offer from, this section, it reveals the identity of the buyers, okay? So there's an addendum that's required for additional buyers when there isn't enough room on the form. Now, if one of the buyers is an entity like a trust or a trustee or a corporation, then there's another form that needs to be completed, which is the representative capacity signature disclosure. Now, this form is great to have in the case that there's lender financing because it enables the financing company to have all the information of the parties that are purchasing the property. Okay. Now, also with that, that form has to conform to the federal fair housing laws, because when it does do that, then it avoids discriminatory language and also the temptation to give legal advice to the buyer or the seller when it comes to the purchase agreement. Okay, so now the next phase that we'll look at is actually the financing term. So we know that financing, that's a way to secure that there's enough funds, that secure the funds to actually cover the purchase of the property. Okay, so a portion of the funding for the financing definitely comes from the buyer. We know that there's a deposit. There could be an increase of the deposit or balance or purchase price. Okay. Now, the buyer and the seller, they work through an escrow company to make sure that everything is in order, a third party that makes sure that everything is taken care of on both ends. So in the case of financing, if the buyer doesn't meet the full requirement of the agreement, the full requirement of having the funding necessary, the seller has the right then to actually cancel the agreement if those requirements are met. Now, another section that is really important is actually the condition of the property. Okay, so when a residential purchase agreement is used to purchase a property, that agreement requires that the purchase is signed for the property as is. Now, when it comes to as is, you might think that it means that the property, it would be the state of the property at the time of signing. But that's actually not true. It actually depends on the state of the property at the time that the buyer accepted the offer. Now, in this case, the disclosures of the purchase agreement would define or detail the status or the state that the property would be in. The buyer has the right to actually compare those disclosures to the actual state of the property. They could visit and do a review of the property to make sure that everything is accurate according to the disclosures. Now, if the property is not at the state that it was at the offer, the buyer has the right and the ability to request for the seller to actually make improvements or to make repairs on the property to make sure that it's at the state that it was when they accepted the offer. If the seller chooses not to make those changes, then the buyer has the right to actually cancel the purchase agreement. So now, overall, we know that agreement, we understand that agreement is a large agreement. There's a lot of forms that are involved, and we can understand because we know that properties, they're the largest investment that a family can make, or for any investors, it's a large investment. So we can understand that there's a lot of forms. That's the reason why I kind of pointed out those three sections. So, because it's really important to know who's buying the property, right? It's also important to know where the funding source is coming from to make sure that the person purchasing the property has the funding, the loans, to be able to cover the cost of the property so that the seller can get, get the funds that they're requiring, because they're selling the house at a certain price. You need to, if they're coming in an agreement with someone, they need to make sure that that person can actually pay and cover the funds for the property. So, but in any case, also if you're buying a property, you want to make sure that the state of that property is the same as it was when you visited that property, which the condition of the property requirement form is really important so that you can review and compare to those disclosures. So in all, these are the areas that are important to me completing the residential purchase agreement.